Today I thought I would share a video regarding hand-forming louvers in some pretty unique shapes, as I've done here on this access door panel on the RS. The RS is kind of my rendition. The overall design is what I think is pretty unique about the late 50s, early 60s German and Italian sports cars. And you can see a few of those styling cues, like the gills similar to the Maserati racers. Of course, the Porsche, they were carburetor access doors, but on our car here, I have an Oberg oil filter with, you can see a little catch tray for changing the oil that catches any of the drain out, and then that has a hose that drains out. You can put an oil pan underneath the car, so it makes it pretty clean and simple to do filter changes. You can see the inner fender well in there is louvered. So these louvers I've knocked out in here are to pull air out, and the intake is down here, and that's just welded on. We haven't finished it out yet, but it gives you the idea. So we'll be pulling air in there. It'll flow up and through, out into the wheel well, and then out of the access door. Now, this access door I made in two pieces. You have the compound curve of the fender rolling in to just a simple curve of the barrel sides. I call it a barrel shape. And I thought it would be easiest to make it in two pieces so that I could fit one half with this half off, fit it to my opening, and then fit the second half in the same manner. Some people would make the door prior, then flange out their opening. I didn't do it that way. It might be easier in hindsight. This is the first time I've done this type of opening on a car. So here's the other side that we're going to work on. And same thing. This side has let's see if I can get it to open here. This side has oil catch can, and then the oil cooler is right down there and set up just in line with that intake duct. So we'll get nice oil cooling there, and it should make for a pretty unique system. I think it's fashionable and functional at the same time. So the material we're using is 60 thousandths 3003 aluminum. As I mentioned before, it was made in two pieces, and here you can see where the weld is on the back side. It's just been smoothed out a little bit, and then the top side, it's pretty much not visible. So what we're going to do is lay out our louver openings. I'm going to cut them with a plasma cutter, and then we'll start knocking them out using a couple of different methods to give them the shape they need. What's unique about making louvers like this, from my experience, is that a lot of guys will use a louver punch on their press or their hammer, but with these are such a unique shape, being arced this way and then rolling into a compound curve, that you have to do it by hand. And it's kind of an old school way of freestyling. There's many different ways that I've seen guys shape louvers, and they all get the job done. It just really comes down to your patience, the tools that you have at hand, and then what kind of finish you're looking for. We're pursuing a finish with what I build. My idea of what I put together here is to build tool room racers, similar to what they built after World War II. So they have a little bit of a hand-made feel to them, but in my opinion, it's what I dig. And all right, so I've got my first cut marked out where I'm going to be using the plasma cutter to cut the opening. Now, it's kind of tricky to, I always like to use a guide, and to make a guide that fits on such a curved panel is a bit tricky, but I found this to work pretty darn slick. You can see that this half-inch tubing, aluminum tubing, has a couple different radiuses in it, and then I have another one here, and I just kind of will lay this out, whichever one fits the radius that I'm working on, and get it lined up with my marks, and then I'll clamp it on just using these simple spring clamps, and use that as a guide to make my first cut. Now, to bend my tubing, I came up with an idea, and I use this for my tube bucks. This is a series of radiuses, and I have just put these small conduit clamps on here where I'll lock my half-inch pipe in and just bend it accordingly to what I need to have done. So the next thing we're going to do is start to shape these louvers, and I use a couple of different tools. For the larger radius here, I can get in there with my dies on my bead roller, and these are spaced an 1.25 inches apart, and that matches the dies on the bead roller, so it's I mean, about as simple as it gets. And when you get into these tighter radiuses, then I have to do a lot more hand shaping, because the dies will hook up and really damage the aluminum. It's just too tight of a radius to roll through. So that's where I go into hand hammering and then using the reciprocating hammer with some dies on it to shape these tighter ones here. All right, so you can see I've got a little bit of shape coming in with just by bead rolling, and I like to do that because it pushes a nice stretch into each louver, gives it a raise, and you can see where the tighter radiuses came in, how it started to hook up and bang out my edge there a little bit. So I used to freak out when stuff like that would happen, but now I've learned that that kind of stuff is easily fixed. So we'll grab some hammers and we'll dolly it out. Alright, so here we're using the reciprocating hammer to give the louvers some more shape. These are just a simple Delrin plastic die that I made. It's nice to use Delrin on aluminum because it doesn't scar it up. It's easy to work with as far as shaping and milling. I mean, you can literally cut it with a jigsaw to make dies, and these dies have done, probably about 50 louvers, pretty good sized louvers with them, and they're getting a little chewed up, but they still do the job. So we'll turn it on here. So that cleaned up the shape fairly good. I really like the reciprocating hammer because it just gives you a nice consistent shape, and it just
stretches them out a little bit more. And that's kind of what we're doing step by step, is just giving them a little bit more definition. But now I'll go in, now that I've got my gaps big enough, I can go in and really clean up those edges and try to make them as consistent as possible. But let's take a look at this louver door we've been working on.
Here you can see the finished product after it's been dressed up and polished out. I also wanted to just show you the intake after the welds have been finished off and smoothed. We've got this Zeus fastener here for opening and closing.